So I'm going to go over what we call our global e-commerce maturity model. For the last 20 years, we've been helping small businesses expand into global operations. We specialize in multi-currency, multilingual, and multi-warehouse e-commerce. All of our customers seem to follow about the same path, and they all run across the same challenges. So let's go over them. The easiest place to start is a national site. There's very low risk, very low education curve for the merchants. They start shipping quite quickly across borders and learn how to label their packages, how to deal with the risk of going across the border. Once they're comfortable with the US, we call them experimental, they start shipping globally from within Canada. Once they have some success there, they tend to expand and start adding currencies and more sophisticated logistics solutions to get their products to their customers faster. The localized site begins translating and adding languages and currencies and much more sophisticated shipping, usually with additional distribution centers, before they eventually get to be a global, seamless e-commerce operation. See here, the merchant risk increases left to right. A national e-commerce site is very low risk for the merchant. Continental and experimental, they take on a little bit more complexity, but the risk is still borne by their shoppers. Eventually, with international and localized, they're meeting their shoppers midway and their conversion rates start to increase. As the merchants take on more of the complexity themselves, the user simplicity goes up and your conversion rate goes up. If a merchant isn't willing to make the investment, they'll always have a very simple e-commerce solution, low risk for them. This turns into the classic chicken versus egg, which came first scenario. Merchants want to see good conversion rates, good revenue coming in internationally before making the investment, but they'll never get that unless they make the investment. So the place to look is your geographic data in Google Analytics. It'll show you vastly different conversion rates internationally versus locally. So where does this complexity come from? Oh, looks like I cut off my font. First error. Anyway, logistics, getting your products to your customers. Currency and foreign exchange risk is a fiscal risk for the merchant. Cultures and customer service add a lot of organizational complexity. And of course, you've got to deal with different legal and regulatory environments in different parts of the world. The first thing everybody tackles is logistics. Borders increase your time to destination. They also increase your cost to destination. Labeling becomes a hassle for your orders. You need to know where everything came from. And a mistake on a shipping label can create huge customer service issues. Returns are complex, and you have to think about where your inventory is going to stay. This one points out the huge disadvantage you're at if you're shipping into the US from Canada. Not only are your orders going to arrive slower, it's going to be more expensive for you to get them there. So yes, as your volume increases, you can negotiate better rates with your providers, but until that time, until you have the transaction volume, you need to absorb some of that cost and some of that risk. There's a whole industry built around this. Freight forwarders, there's one locally called Chit Chat, so you can drop off your packages in the afternoon. The next day they're being shipped via USPS across the border. There's also similar things where you can ship one courier package over to Europe and they'll break it apart and ship it locally. But eventually you're going to end up with multiple distribution centers using third-party logistics. Currencies. Nobody knows or cares what their conversion rate is with the Canadian dollar. And if you put a currency converter on your website, all it's doing is saying that you're from out of country and it's going to be a big hassle for the shopper. You also want to be able to take advantage of market pricing. Books are a clear example of something that's much cheaper in the US than it is in Canada, not based on exchange rates. You also need to think about your payment processors. PayPal is super easy, but it adds 1% to all your transactions that occur outside your local market. And some card providers will actually charge the card holder a service fee for doing an international transaction, even if it's done in their home currency. The other thing you need to think about is not everywhere has credit cards like North America, and there's different payment methods. So duties and regulations. You don't think about this much in North America, but there are some point of origin duties for textiles going into the US. So you have to be careful about things like that. Japan has a leather quota, so if you're shipping products into Japan, that's a challenge. Labeling regulations, certification regulations, and of course privacy. You want to talk to your insurance agent before you start shipping and going into international markets. Liability insurance, if you're doing significant business in the States, can be huge. You also need to figure out what your corporate structure is going to be. If not today, what it's going to be in the future. Because this will affect the taxes that you have to collect and bill, and this is way more complex in the States than it is in Canada. Languages and localization. How we say things and how we spell things identifies who we are and where we're from. It's more than about translating your website, it's understanding the local idioms. You also need to think about time zones. If you're presenting a multilingual site, You're servicing customers, they think you're local, they're not going to wait 8 hours to hear from customer service. Different areas have different holidays and celebrations, and it's more complex than just Canada Day versus the 4th of July. In the UK, Mother and Sunday is in March. In North America, it's Mother's Day is in May. And different markets have different expectations. The VAT is included with the price on products in Europe, and whereas here we just include it in the checkout. Your SEO becomes more complex if you're doing business internationally. You have to make sure you're using your canonical tags, your hreflang tags, and your Google sitemaps. So you're not competing against yourself using the same content on multiple sites. Your content marketing gets more complex. How many Facebook pages do you want to run? And your email list needs to be segmented. If you think you're going to go global, start segmenting now. In the end, there's no shortcuts to going global. You need to plan ahead to avoid dead ends, so you don't end up having to re-platform hopefully down in the future. And it's going to take time and money, but it's a good investment because there's way more e-commerce shoppers outside of Canada than there is within Canada. So we always recommend that you seek professional help. It's not brain surgery. And you're not the first person to do this. There are accountants, all the big accounting firms will help you set up internationally. Your lawyer should know people, and of course your IT people should understand the infrastructure that you're going to need as you expand overseas with your accounting systems and other platforms.